Discussing 5 things I've learned in my Vision 101 class. As you see in front of you right now, there is pork, potatoes, and salad. I'll be specifically talking about the pork and potatoes. This was my dinner I created a while back. There's a bunch of chemical processes going within the pork and the potatoes. Specifically, I'll be talking about the caramelization and Maillard reaction that's occurring with the pork, and then I'll talk about the gelatinization of the potatoes. Caramelization and Maillard reactions are very similar as they're both non-enzymatic reactions. The difference being that caramelization is only sugar, while Maillard reaction is both sugar and amino acids, and amino acids are the building blocks of protein. With caramelization, it's specifically drying out the sugar, and it creates a much crunchier texture with a bittersweet aftertaste. And this pork here is covered in a brown sugar dry rub, which is why on the outside it's very hard, but when you cut into it, it's very soft because the sugar also tenderizes the meat. And the Maillard reaction is actually occurring on the meat itself. This is outside of the rub. And that's because it's the sugar within the meat with the amino acids that meat contains that creates that browning that we all know of when we put it on a grill. And that browning brings complex flavors from the amino acids, sugars, and nucleotides. If you look right underneath the pork, you can see the potatoes. These potatoes were air fried, and the reaction that occurred was gelatinization, which specifically is the application of heat, water, and starch reacting with one another. And when the heat is interacting with the starch starts to swell. And as it swells, it absorbs water and eventually bursts into the rest of the potato, making it create more flavor while also loosening up the structure of the sugar molecules. Now, for another thing I learned in class, this is fermentation. Fermentation is the process of a item getting more flavor built in using something like yeast or another bacteria. It's essentially the spreading of bacteria within a substance. And this gives it a far more complex flavor and makes the dough really tasty. And this was specifically in a fridge, meaning I could ferment it for longer due to the fact that the yeast can't go overboard during this process. The final process I'll be talking about is emulsion. Emulsion is the process of two separate liquids that are insoluble with one another combining into one through some sort of disturbance. In cookies specifically, it's when the water is being dehydrated out of the cookie. It swells up inside the cookie and bursts. In this cookie, you can actually see where that was happening, but because the cookies were so thin, it just ended up creating a bunch of holes in the cookie instead of actually combining with the oils that are within the cookie. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and I really hope you learned something. Have a nice day.